Okay, guys. Well, it's very nice this morning, in fact, to have with us the lovely Ros Morrison, who you all know, who obviously co-directed Cross and Switchblade. She's been involved with loads, Millennium Mysteries, and it's quite often there with Brian on a Thursday morning. And like we had Ros on a few weeks back when we were talking about forgiveness, because I don't know whether a lot of people know that Ros is actually a retired professional counsellor. So she brings to the club lots of expertise in the whole area of well-being and mental health, which is really fab. And so I thought it'd be absolutely brilliant to get Ros on every now and then to talk about perhaps some of the more practical things about, you know, how to keep ourselves well, particularly concerned with mental health. And Ros, you were just saying that actually this week, the BBC have relaunched a week called Rethink. Do you just want to explain what that's about?
Yes, I happened to hear it on Monday, Martin. They've launched this whole week of Rethink across all their radio stations, where they are looking at what's gone before and what we think might come next after lockdown, and how its perspectives may have changed our thinking about how we behave, how we live, how we work, and what things are important to us. So I thought it's actually quite a relevant subject for all of us, actually.
Yeah, and I think also in this time of the great pause, it has given everybody opportunity to pause and perhaps reevaluate where they're at with their own mental health, and perhaps particularly, we were talking just last week about history and how history is being reinterpreted because of, you know, the pulling down of statues and the way in which you know, our black friends you know, have been treated, particularly in the light of George Floyd and the killing in America and all the protests that have been happening. But Ros, we were having a little chat earlier, and you were talking about particularly that very often in our past we can have stuff that keeps coming back, and yet actually it needs to be reinterpreted in a more positive way. Do you want to just sort of tell us what your thoughts were about that?
Yeah, I think all of us, Martin, when we've been alone or just with one other person or a few other people, all our thinking inevitably has turned a little bit more inward, because we've had time to reflect. We haven't been rushing around, we haven't been out and about, and so sometimes that thinking has led us back down old pathways, which may be very, very familiar, but not particularly helpful. And I remember not that long ago talking to a friend of mine. We were just driving along one day before lockdown, and something was said about art. And she said, "Oh, I'm rubbish at art." And I said, "Oh, well, whoever told you that?" And she said, "Oh, I was told it as a child." And that little pathway had stayed with her. And she was a woman of my age. And that little pathway had absolutely stayed with her. And I said, we need to think about that now. Is it still true? Was it ever true? And how has it affected your life all the way through? And actually, it had stopped her from even trying to do any sort of artwork, which I'm glad to say she's picking up now. But, you know, it just struck me, just a simple thing like that. And we know that there are bigger things in our lives. That's a small example. But there are bigger things in our lives which come back to us very powerfully, often as a voice in our head. And sometimes we have to ask, where did that voice come from? Yeah. Is it true now?
Yeah.
And how has it affected me negatively in the past? Can it be changed?
Yeah, I think that's so true, because I mean, I think with a lot of the guys in the club, and myself particularly as well, you know, things from your childhood can actually hold you back, can actually have a massive hold over you. I think we underestimate the power of words, but particularly if there's been abuse or control or manipulation, that can actually stunt, if you like, our personal growth. How do you overcome that? If you know, we often talk about we're not defined by our past, but actually very often, like you said, people are held back by perhaps things that have been spoken into their lives, or things, you know, bad things that have happened to them in the past that they can't move on from.
I think, firstly, it's to acknowledge that it's even there. Because sometimes it's a bit like the cinders on a footpath. You keep walking the path, but you don't actually look at the path. What's it made up of? And there are things that have dropped so far back in our thinking that we don't realise that that's what we're acting upon. So first of all, time to reflect, as we have had, to think, is this thought a helpful thought to me now? Is it even true? That's the first test. Hold it up to the light. Is this thought even true? You know, I'm rubbish at whatever. Is that actually true? Do I know that to be a fact, or is it just that I've taken it as a fact when it had no substance?
Mm.
The other thing is with negative experiences, of course, things that happen in our childhood. The child's default setting is always, it must be my fault.
Mm.
If bad things happen in our childhood, children always decide in their young brain, this is my fault. They take on the responsibility. Often they'll take on the responsibility for what adults around them are doing and assume it's because of them. And again, it's needing a person or a trusted friend to look at that with and say, well, it was happening, but my conclusion may be the wrong conclusion. So looking realistically now through adult eyes, not trying to undo or say it doesn't matter, but to bring it into the present and look at it in our adult place.
Yeah.
And maybe say to our child, actually, you know, you were the child in this situation, not the adult.
Yeah.
And the adults must take responsibility for themselves.
Yeah.
Well, that's the first way to do it. The second way is to say, I'm not going to let this have a hold over me in the same way anymore, and make a decision, which a lot of people in recovery do. They say, I'm not going to be this person anymore. I don't want to live like this. So it's actually an active choice to say, I am not going to live like this. But we can't just do that by will alone. We do need good friends. We do need sometimes good counsellors to work with us and talk about those issues. Because I'm sure that in lockdown, and I don't just mean people in recovery, I mean all of us, we may have looked back, I certainly can look back at this time and think there were a few little habits of mine which maybe weren't such a helpful thing to do. And I've had to look at them again and say, but that's because I've been here in the house, no one else to really see what's happening or doing. It's nothing terrible. I'm not coming out on something terrible. I'm just saying little things that maybe not useful to me.
Yeah.
But because we're unseen in lockdown, it's easy to fall back into those ways, both in our living and also in our thinking.
Yeah.
So in rethinking for the future, saying, well, you know, what are the good things that were in my life before lockdown? What was positive? What was helpful? What was constructive? And what can I now see? Actually, I don't need that anymore. There are some things I don't need in my life anymore.
Yeah.
I know that folks coming to the club have often said, coming to the club is a highlight of the week because it's a positive. And, you know, watching this now being broadcast is a helpful way of keeping that contact. And hopefully not too far in the future, we'll be able to meet again. But looking also around and saying, you know, are those relationships helpful? Are those friendships useful to me, or are they pulling me down?
Yeah.
So it's a great time to rethink, isn't it?
Yeah.
For all,
It
not
is.
just for
Yeah.
you, me, and everybody else.
It is. No, Ros, that's really, really helpful. And I think what I'm getting from you is that obviously, actually, although, you know, we are not responsible for what's happened to us in the past, actually we do have responsibility to actually perhaps move forward and come to a point of saying, I'm not going to let my past hold me back. When I was in my 30s, I had for many, many years felt a deep sense of rejection, and from my father, which went right back to when my father was absent during the first 3 years of my life. And it went right back to that. And I had to come to a point where I had proper counseling and actually had to just release any feelings of rejection. And I was able to move forward. And I think what I would encourage, and I think basically what you're saying, is this whole thing that actually, you know, there comes a time where you can say, no, I'm not going to be ruled by these negative feelings, these negative things that hold me back, and I'm going to deal with them. And that doesn't mean you have to have necessarily, you know, big sort out with whoever it is who's, you know, hurt you or whatever. But it does mean that actually you might need to get professional help and speak to someone who can lead you through the process of being able to move forward. Would you say that's right, Ros?
Yes, I think that's absolutely right, Martin. And also, not just letting go and you know, I've been rereading the 12 steps because I was interested to see that. You know, that forgiveness is part of that, which we touched on last time we talked. Forgiveness and forgiving oneself and others, finding a way out of the mazes that keep giving us this ever decreasing circle feeling, and then replacing it with new things,
Yeah.
with good things. You know, the folks in the drama club, you know, how many of them we said, look at the talent, look
Yeah.
at that talent just
Yeah.
shining out and
Yeah,
growing.
no, totally.
There are new things, and you know, in our lives, new things to look forward to always, because
Yeah.
they're the things that allow us to flourish
Yeah.
and strengthen us. So I think, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely getting help with things that may be holding us back, being honest with ourselves, and sometimes just not letting that old pattern of thinking sort of sit in the background, influencing our reactions and our thoughts,
Yeah.
because they can very easily be a bit subtle, and they do have a habit of just recurring every now and again. They never things that have happened a long way back never tend to really disappear, but we can put them in a place that is not harmful to us.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Roz, that's really helpful. And can I just say, it's lovely having you here. We're going to
Thank you.
probably see you every now and then, giving us
Yeah.
these real nuggets of wisdom to help us on our way with our mental health. But thank you so much, Roz. It's so great to have you here. Thank you so much for
Thanks,
joining us.
Martin. I love watching the program too.
Oh, bless you. Take care.